My name is Jeremy Welch, and throughout this PowerPoint, I will be reflecting on my cross-cultural immersion experience to Tucson, Arizona, where I studied the topics of culture and immigration. One of our first experiences while on the trip was visiting with journalist Todd Miller. This discussion with Miller was a particularly powerful one for me because I could tell by listening to him that he was incredibly well-versed on the current policies and figures related to border enforcement. Some facts such as the $18 billion flowing towards border enforcement, or Miller's story about the Border Patrol agent who was dismissed due to some pretty innocuous comments he made regarding immigration policies, really made me question my pre-immersion thoughts. One question that I was asking myself after Miller's talk was that if there are already a lot of resources devoted to border enforcement, are more resources really going to help the situation? One of the biggest moments of my entire trip occurred when our group arrived in Nogales and had the chance to see the border wall for ourselves. This experience was one during which I felt several emotions as I reflected by the wall. It struck me the most that an area as beautiful as that surrounding Nogales had been chopped up and tarnished by something as ugly as giant steel rods sticking out of the ground. I felt terrible leaving Nogales the way it was, and I felt a sense of responsibility for having caused such disruption. One question I had that resulted from this experience was that if I am truly okay with a policy such as a border wall, why did I feel anxious while leaving the thing I supported so much? Another powerful event during my experience occurred the same day as our visit to Nogales. Our walk in the desert was one that put me in the exact same type of environment migrants have had to navigate. One thing that really struck me about the surrounding environment was how inhospitable it was. After only a short time of walking, I was already reaching for a drink from my water bottle and wanting to get out of the sun. I tried to imagine myself as a migrant crossing through that type of environment, all while having had an already long, hard journey before reaching this point. This made me really start to doubt my ability to do the same journeys that migrants have had to do, including the journey Enrique had to do in our class's book. This realization led me to ask myself, if the United States policy is to make the only accessible place for migrants to cross areas such as the desert, what kind of message is this sending to immigrants and to the world regarding the land of opportunity? The next day, our group got to experience Operation Streamline, which is a court process some migrants go through after being picked up by Border Patrol or other law enforcement agencies. While sitting in the courtroom, the proceedings bothered me greatly because the court seemed to treat migrants sitting before it as a herd of cattle. The court seemed unconcerned with each immigrant as an individual, especially with regards to their personal stories. The group of, quote, illegal aliens were treated just as that, a group of criminals who did not belong in this country. My discontent with this policy and how it treats migrants can be reflected in my main question I had while going through this experience, which was, are policies such as Operation Streamline really the best way to deal with this issue? Does it violate the basic rights that all people deserve? One of the last, but most impactful experiences our group got to have was with a college student named Dario. Dario works with an organization called Scholarships A to Z, which tries to provide educational aid and opportunities to students, particularly students who are affected by U.S. immigration policies. Dario's story about his past and his struggle to live out a normal life really touched me. Dario's story was so impactful because he himself was so relatable. He was a young college student trying to balance coursework with personal interests such as friends and family. This made it easier for me to place myself in his position and grasp a fuller understanding of the human aspect of migration. What impressed me the most about Dario was the fact that despite all of the barriers and hardships he has had to overcome, he was still grateful for all the opportunities he has had. Dario's presentation led me to ask the question, why would our country want to keep people like Dario from enjoying the benefits of being a citizen? One of the most interesting things that happened to me throughout this experience was the fact that, as I got some of my initial questions answered, such as how much money does border enforcement currently cost, I began to develop additional questions. Each of these questions I mentioned at the end of the previous slides were ones that I had developed from each of the specific experiences. These questions are ones that I have continued to think about even after leaving Arizona. I do not know if these questions will ever be answered, but they are ones I believe are important for me and others to think about. This trip has motivated me to develop questions like the ones listed on this slide and do my own research and reading into this issue. Another interesting thing that happened to me on the trip was how my initial view of immigration, one that was solely based on the illegal argument, broadened to include other aspects such as economic and human aspects. What I do want to achieve through my continued study on the topic of immigration is a broader and more thorough understanding of the issue. Not only was this experience supposed to give our group more insight into the issue of immigration, it also was intended to expose us to and develop our understanding of culture. Culture, in my opinion, is defined as aspects of a region, country, ethnic group, or society that are common or prevalent within it. Culture is one of those buzzwords that is used to refer to a lot of different aspects of a group of people. Although culture does include many aspects, some common characteristics are institutions, practices, art and food, rituals and music, and other facets that exist within the culture. Going forward, this will be the definition of culture to keep in mind. One of the most unique aspects of our entire trip is actually a small-scale example of culture. Within our group and throughout the duration of our trip, we had what was commonly referred to as our, quote, Carol Talks. These conversations became an institution unto themselves and were nightly practices for our group. Sometimes these conversations would occur at the Borderlinks facility, other times they occurred at local eateries. These talks allowed me to process a large amount of information and provided me the opportunity to continually challenge myself with the different questions and points of view other group members offered. In my opinion, the Carol Talks offered me the chance to understand the issue of immigration to a fuller extent, which would include viewpoints that I did not consider or did not pay much attention to before. Even though many of our group members had different viewpoints on the issue than I did, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to their opinions. In my opinion, studying the issue of immigration with an additional focus on culture was extremely beneficial because it allowed me to see the immigration issue from a different perspective. Some of the questions I came to the experience with, or developed throughout the experience, were either answered or better understood due to the fact that our group had developed a learning culture from within. Being able to experience the Arizona, Mexico, and migrant cultures also allowed me to gain more insight into the issue of immigration. Some of the questions listed on the slide are some examples of those questions I have gained a greater level of insight into due to the culture. For example, the question regarding why people immigrate would not have been as thoroughly analyzed without taking into context Mexico's culture, economy, and political system. Studying immigration through a cultural lens proved to be very beneficial for me. Throughout this entire journey, I have had the opportunity to see and experience a lot of things. These experiences are ones that I will not only remember for the rest of my life, but also have an impact on how I view culture and immigration now and in the future. Through these experiences, I have been able to broaden my view of immigration to include different aspects and perspectives. This broader view has made me question some of my previous stances and inspired me to do additional research on the topic of immigration. Thank you for listening to this brief video about my immersion experience. I hope this video has inspired you, the viewer, to continually question your positions on issues like immigration and further research these issues.